seated, but we'll be bouncing around a little bit tonight, so there's not really a narrative to read through. And so I guess you can start in 1 Timothy chapter 6 if you want to go there. We'll get there eventually, and we'll be bouncing around some. Never mean to embarrass anybody, but I have to be honest, it's just good to see Sonia here tonight. She's been having surgery, taking care of Mom, having sick grandkids, and just had a whole lot going on. So it's just good to see her be able to be out for a service. And I know she's been online watching, but it's hard to see people through that little bitty camera back there. So it's really cool, kind of cool when they can be here in person. So appreciate it. Plus, that's an answer. We've been praying for her healing. She's one of many that's had surgery. So really, we could fill the church back up just with the surgery people that get back healed up there. There's a lot of people on the surgery list suddenly this year, and so let's keep them in prayer. Maybe this is going to be an answer to a lot of people's prayer, but this is the last message on Money Matters tonight. Lesson number 12. We've been talking about grace giving, 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, and we kind of really drilled down on it for about 3 different weeks, and we call it faith promise missions, but it's grace giving. And tithe is obedience, grace giving is opportunity, and it's in the Old Testament, it's in the New Testament. People try to say, well, grace giving is the New Testament version of tithing, and it's not. Tithing is tithing, it's obedience, grace giving is grace giving, and like I said, we went clear back and saw in the Old Testament when they were building the tabernacle under Moses, that was grace giving, that was a willing offering, that was not tithe or obedience. Tonight, I don't know that I've ever preached a message on this particular subject. It probably hits me as a pastor and former missionary a little harder than it would hit most of you, but I would assume that many of you are seeing more and more of this and challenged with more of this. Certainly if you are involved in ministry, this is important information for you. And I would just entitle this, The Balance with Benevolence. The balance with benevolence, or wisdom in benevolence. And benevolence, it's not just money. Benevolence is kind acts, doing good to others, doing for other people. But when you think of benevolence, we tend to think of money. And when I came many years ago, the Wednesday night offering would be kind of for benevolence. And there'd be, $20, $30, $40 here. And over time, there'd be $200 or $300 in benevolence. And then somebody'd walk in off the street and want their electric bill paid. And it was always kind of the same people wanting the same need. And the money was quickly gone. And at some point, I just studying the Bible, I'm like, that really doesn't feel like what benevolence should look like. And so we started putting 5% of our general fund for benevolence, and I would hear about somebody who went to the hospital in our church or something like that. Some widow had a furnace, and reality was it wasn't people coming asking for it. We were just trying to be a blessing to people. But it's not even just money. Sometimes it's just doing good. But having been a missionary in Kenya, every time we went to the store, there were 20 or 30 street kids just there begging. And some missionaries were like, I'm not going to help anybody. That's what I mean about balance. You can't go there. And if you've ever helped anybody, you've certainly helped somebody that you realize you got taken. And so you say, I'm not going to help him. No, that's not the answer either. But giving your money to anybody and everybody and having them misuse it, that's not the answer. So it's a struggle. And you look at the United States government, they're basically printing money and putting us into poverty, trying to pay for the poverty of our country. You can't do that. You can't buy people out of poverty. So how does a child of God not lose the biblical concept of benevolence in the world in which we live and not just get to the point where you give you look at the building like this and people stop by all the time, people call all the time, and basically it's not a problem to help people, but they don't want help. They want you to pay the rent and they want you to pay the electric and take care of them, and then you get 15 families that you're taking care of for the next 2 or 3 years, and won't be very long. We have to shut down the bus ministry and shut down the missions ministry, and we'd be doing what the government's doing. We'd be feeding people. And there's nothing wrong with helping people, but we're going to look at some biblical ways to know who to help and when to help and how to help and things like that. Proverbs 3:27 says this, withhold not good. Again, it's not just money. Sometimes it's a helping hand. Sometimes it's giving him a ride to the airport, right? No, he's taking us to the airport tomorrow. So he's doing good. From them to whom it is due, when it's in the power of thine hand to do it. Sometimes it's not in our power to. Sometimes somebody needs surgery. They don't want me cutting on them. But I can pray for them. I can visit them, I can, sometimes the ladies can send a card or make some soup for them and encourage them. I mean, it's what's in our power to do something good, to be a blessing. And again, we can't help everybody all the time, but we can help somebody sometime. And that's the key to living the Christian life and keeping that balance. The challenge is discerning. It says in there, withhold not good to them to whom it is due. The challenge is discerning to whom it is due before you give. Godly wisdom will protect us from those who would take advantage of our kindness. I've lived my Christian life most in Africa and here in the States. Most people know that Christians should be generous, and they'll make you feel guilty. They'll come in here with a story and a half, and you got 3 vans parked out there, and you got a house up on the hill, and you got all this massive building, and you can afford to give to them, but they may not care anything about the things of God, and they may actually be living a wicked lifestyle, and you're taking God's money and investing in them. So it's a very challenging situation to have to deal with. If it was just as easy as people that have give to people that don't have, it would be pretty easy, but it's not always that simple. 1 Timothy 6, and I said we get there, verses 17 through 19. That whole 1 Timothy chapter 6 is the chapter that talks about the love of money is the root of all evil, meaning in financial areas. If you get the wrong, we talked about the mistress of materialism, if you get to the point where you love money too much. But he says in verses 17 through 19 later on there in the chapter, and this chapter is about money and possessions, but still you'll see here that it's more than that. It says, verse 17, charge them that are rich in this world. And I know we're not Bill Gates. And I know we're not a lot of these other people, what Bezos and all these, there's all these guys you hear about and all that, the guy that owns Twitter now and all that stuff. But let me tell you something, compared to most of the world, we are blessed, amazingly blessed. It says, who rich in this world, that they might be not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches. So you better not get an attitude, kind of get your nose up in the air because you have a little bit, but in the living God, who giveth us richly all things to joy. Because here's the thing, you can lose your health, you can lose your life, you can lose your wealth. The only thing you're going to hold on to is God. So you might want to hold on to God, because rich people die too. And rich people lose things too. And rich people can become poor people quickly. And God's the only thing you can hold on to. Verse 18 says, that they do good and that they be rich in good works. So this is benevolence. It's doing good, not just financial, but doing good, rich in good works. But ready to distribute is the idea that, hey, share what you have with others. Willing to communicate, find out what's going on. Then verse 19 says, laying up in store for themselves a good foundation against the time to come, that they may lay hold on eternal life. You're going to receive blessings in eternity by investing and doing good for others down here. So when Paul is talking in the book of Ephesians about putting on the new man, he said we have the old man, we have the new man, and he says you put off these works of the old man and put on the new man. He says in Ephesians 4:28, let him that stole steal no more. That makes sense. If you get saved and if your life changed, you probably ought to quit stealing. But it's interesting what he says here. Now he's telling a guy that just got saved, you're putting off the old man and those old habits and those old ways, and you're putting on the new man. So he says, he that steals, steal no more. You say, yeah, that's right. You ought not to be a thief. You ought to be honest. But rather let him labor, working with his hands, a thing which is good. And the last part of the verse is amazing, that he may have to give to him that needeth. You would think you would just tell a thief, quit stealing, quit taking other people's stuff, have what you have and enjoy it and use it. But God says, no, once you're a new man in Christ, you labor so that you can have, so that you can bless other people. That is a very Bible Christian point of view. Benevolence is in the very fiber of God's Son leaving heaven and coming and dying on a cross for us. He did good for us. We could not save ourselves, and He did what was needed for us to be saved. So we ought to, at the point of trusting Christ, we should become generous people by the very nature of our salvation. Now again, it gets back to the point, many of us are like, I need, who am I to give? But it's amazing, and we go back to the grace giving there, the churches of Macedonia, they were in great poverty, great affliction. It's not about the amount you can give. What about the widow when she throws in her 2 mites? She gave out all that she had. It's about a heart attitude of, I can help where I can help. God will have to take care of my needs, but I don't have to wait till I have excess to be a blessing. I can use my gifts, my abilities, whatever. It's not always about money, but it's about a benevolent heart, a benevolent mind. So there's questions you might ask tonight. We won't discuss them for time's sake, but how often does someone approach you to ask for food or money? Now again, if you're a contractor, people are always asking you to help them fix this and fix that. I mean, so people may ask for other things besides food and money. But I mean, how often? And again, when I lived in Africa, it happened every day. Here, it doesn't happen every day, but it happens often because I'm a pastor and I'm in this building and people stop by and want some people call on the phone. And you say, well, how do you deal with a massive amount of people? Well, basically here we have a food pantry. Anybody can get food. But if somebody wants electric bill paid or help in things, we just say as a church that you have to attend here or be a part of a family that's here. Because here's the thing, I don't know how they're living. I don't know what they're doing. And I tell people, I say, listen, you need to find a local church, be a part of that, and then they'll know your needs. Hey, understand, when this is being written, there were no government programs. There was no welfare, there was no Social Security, any of that stuff. The churches were taking care of the Christian believers that were struggling and that were poor. But the Bible never told the Christian that they had to take care of the entire world that was poor. In the Old Testament, in the nation of Israel, they were God's chosen people. They were told, don't you glean your entire field. You leave some of it so that the people who don't have a field and don't own anything can come and get that and feed their family. They were poor, but they were the poor of God's chosen people. We kind of have the idea, and people have the idea, do you even comprehend the billions and billions of dollars, and I know this is political, but the billions of dollars that we're given trying to fix the problems all over the world? And we're not fixing most of them. And many times, just recently we found out so many $1 billion went to some of the countries that we had gone in there during the Gulf War and all that and helped them. Billions of dollars was spent to train Al-Qaeda people to attack us, because that's what happens when you get billions of dollars and you're not there to see where it goes. It's just, I hope none of that, I don't know how that's all going to come out at the judgment seat of Christ. Y'all always wonder, are any politicians going to be at the judgment seat of Christ? And I'm sure they are. But what a mess. And I don't listen to the conspiracy theory people. And hey, the people that follow this stuff, it will melt your brain to know the billions of dollars we give away and throw away when we could help people right here in our own country. And I'm not trying to, I'm just saying that we don't do well with benevolence on a world scale. We don't do good with benevolence. When I lived in Kenya, America would send Kenya millions, if not billions, usually millions. They weren't into billions because there wasn't a war or anything in there. They would send them millions of dollars, but China would actually send workers who would come and hire people, and they would build roads. So the workers had jobs, they hired people that had jobs, and they would build roads that you could see, but we would write a check and it would disappear in the corruption of the government, and we would never see anything built. Now you should think, how dumb can Americans be? Why wouldn't you send people over there, spend your own money, see what's being done, and hire people in the local community to do it? But no, we write a check to another government, it's all stolen by the government leaders, and no blacktop ever gets laid. And so it's just this benevolence thing. And so if we're not wise, we're giving money to somebody that's going to go out and use the rest of their money for something else. I don't mind helping somebody, but I want to make sure I'm helping somebody that's trying to help themselves. I want to make sure I'm helping somebody that's trying, well, none of us are perfect, to live for the Lord. God does not call us. We should not feel guilty about helping people who want to go out, drink and party and waste all their money, and then we'll pay their bills. I remember it clearly, and it happened, oh my goodness, 15, 20 years ago. We were back here, and we got a call, and somebody needed food, and it was around the holidays and stuff, and so I gathered up some food, and I took the food to the person's house, and I got to the door, and they had one of those little corner windows, and I knocked, and I saw them run and open the freezer, grab food, and throw it out on the back porch. It was wintertime. I saw them do it through that little window. So I knew, okay, this is going to be fun. But that's all right. I brought my food, God knows, and it was, and I was just doing it on behalf of the church. So I brought the food in, and I put the food on the table and all that kind of stuff, and thought, well, he'll appreciate that. And I sat down, and I wanted to share the gospel with him. And as soon as I sat down, he said, here's my cable bill, and here's my this bill, and here's my that bill. And I thought to myself, you know what? And listen, I'm not perfect. It's not like I never watch any kind of TV or anything like that. But in all of my married life, we've never had a cable bill. So I just didn't feel compelled to pay somebody's cable bill for him, because that's not a necessity of life. And he just kept laying stuff down there, and I said, and so I kind of shared the gospel, and I said, sir, and I tell people this all the time, you need to find a church. Listen, Christians are obligated to help God's people that are trying to do right. We're not obligated to help people that won't do what the Bible says they ought to be doing. And so when this happens, when someone approaches you to ask for food or money, what's the first reaction? And sometimes we do feel sorry, we feel guilty. Sometimes we just want to help them just to get rid of them because we feel so we don't know what to do with them. So how do you go about assessing the need of a person or his family when they ask? We need to seek balance and benevolence. It's kind of like, when we do Vacation Bible School, we weigh pennies, and so there's just there's just that balance thing. You put one bucket on this side, one, it's a big T, and it either falls or that. Well, imagine, if you will, that there's a big balance when it comes to benevolence, and on one side you're hanging Galatians 6:10. On the other side you're hanging Matthew 10:16. And Galatians 6:10, we read it already, says, "As we therefore have opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of faith." It teaches us to do good to others as opportunities arise. That's a call of Christian generosity, or what we would call benevolence. And so we tip the scale this way, and people know this, so people come along and say, "Well, you're Christian, you have to help me. You're supposed to." It's amazing what people know about the Bible, isn't it? They know you're supposed to help them. So the scale's tipped. But then Matthew 10:16 says, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves." It warns us that the world is full of wolves, and some of those wolves are panhandlers who attempt to take advantage of Christian generosity. Therefore, we must be wise as serpents while remaining harmless as doves. And so, yes, we should help people, but yes, we should be careful not to be taken advantage. Yes, we should help people. Yes, we should be careful. And you see, it's a constant balance of not just giving to other people because they make you feel guilty, but to know that God is leading you. I knew missionaries, they would put a certain amount of money aside, and when that money was gone, which was usually the first week of the month, they didn't help anybody else. Other people just didn't help people. Other people were giving away all their support all the time. And I just said, "Lord, I don't ever want to get in any of those extremes. I want to pray, and I want to help people as I see God lead." And I go back now, and Stephen Gunjiri, who's the pastor of the Kanisa Kibatila Bibla Tema, one time we were over there, and he said, "Oh, Brother Mattis, I just want to tell you how I just want to thank you for the time you took my wife home from the hospital." I didn't even know I took his wife home, that she had a baby, and of course riding home from the hospital on those roads in a public transportation. And he said, "You stopped at your house and you got this powdered milk." They'd never seen any powdered milk. We must have had some powdered milk left at the house that we didn't want to use, and I gave it to them. So they thought we were doing them a favor, and I gave them powdered milk. And we stopped and bought him a blanket. And he just went on. I don't remember any of it. But I remember I did that for a dozen other people that could care less. But Stephen, it meant something to him. And Stephen's living for the Lord and blessing people, drives a car now. God's blessed him. We helped dozens of pastors, many of who, when the money stopped, they were gone. Others who are serving the Lord, they just needed a step up. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know which was which. I can't tell you the times I got taken advantage of in Kenya. Can't tell you the times people stopped by my house. One guy said, "I'll leave you my spare tire. I just need this money right now. I just can't live." And I said, "Oh, keep your spare tire." And he's supposed to do something. I learned this. I have I tell the churches, this is true of the church, and this is true of me personally. Don't give away money you want back. Don't ever do it. Because then it's a debt, and it'll come between you and them. If you're not willing to give it to somebody, just don't do it. Because don't say, "I'm going to loan this to you," because that's just the devil. It's just an opportunity to get between you. So if you're going to give it, give it. So I learned that. If you're going to give it, give it. But you have to have that balance. Wisdom and benevolence, well-meaning, kind. So there's 3 Bible questions quickly tonight that will help us be wise while still striving to be benevolent. Because I don't think we should be cold-hearted to people in need. But at the same time, I don't think we should be foolish with God's money or our own money, as the case might be. So first question you ask, are they willing to work? That's pretty straightforward. Now, I'll be honest with you, these are Bible questions. These are not questions that the government's asking people. Okay? These are questions that we're, as believers, supposed to ask people. 1 Timothy 5:8, Paul writing to Timothy, training young Timothy to be in the ministry, he said, "But if any provide not for his own, especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel." An infidel is an unbeliever. Even an unbeliever knows that he ought to take care of his house. So when a believer won't take care of the house, that's even worse than an unbeliever, because we ought to know better. God gives us responsibility to take care of our household. And if a person is not going to take care of their household, is the person who says he needs money trying to work and earn a living? The norm for society is for each to provide for their own through labor. That is no longer the norm for our society. But it has been the norm, and it is a Bible norm, that a person is supposed to be trying to provide. But things happen, extenuating circumstances, and again, it's important that we understand, when this was written, there was no social programs. Now, maybe Rome and maybe towns and communities had something, but nothing at the level of our government right now. And so the church really had the responsibility of looking out for the poor people among those who had trusted Christ. And many of them, by trusting Christ, lost their job, their inheritance, their family, their place to live. So this was serious Bible teaching at the time. But they had to know whom to help, right? They couldn't just help everybody that wanted help. And so that's where some of this teaching came from. And so, work in 2 Thessalonians 3, 10 through 12, talking to the church of Thessalonica. He says, "For even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat." That's pretty cruel, pretty harsh. "For we hear that there are some which walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies," partying, staying up half the night, playing video games. Can't work, but we're perfectly willing to let somebody. I'll tell you the truth. There are people that work harder at not working than some of us who work and just pay our bills. Verse 12 says, "Now them that are such we command and exhort by our Lord Jesus Christ, that with quietness they work and eat their own bread." Just work, eat your own bread. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in our country that's crazy, but we are going to run into people. Some are Christians, some are not. We're just a church and we're a building on the road with a nice parking lot. They're going to come wanting us to take care of them. And are we ungodly and unbiblical for saying, no, we're not going to pay your bills and do things when you have people in the household that are work age that aren't working and aren't trying? What if a person is unemployed? Well, his work is to search for work. He's unemployed, but his work is to search for work. If he's making a conscious effort to work, then his immediate need by Bible standards is legitimate. So if somebody is unemployed for a period of time, but I remember years ago, we're going to travel, and if you ever traveled and time change, you get jet lag. And jet lag really knocked you down for a few days, if not a week or two. But I saw a doctor, and there's a lady, and of course being missionaries, this was humor that missionaries shared, but there was a lady talking to her doctor, and the doctor's looking across the desk and says, "Ma'am, I think 4 years is a little long for jet lag." She's been lazy and tired for 4 years. It's not jet lag, it's lazy and tired. And so if somebody's unemployed, that's a time that a church or a community or a person ought to be helpful. But if they're unemployed for 4 years, something's wrong. And so we have what if a person's physically impaired? There's a challenging one. Right after Paul required people to provide for themselves, Paul acknowledged that aged are not subject to the rule. We just read 1 Timothy 5:8. Well, 1 Timothy 5:9 says, "Let not a widow be taken into the number under 80 years old, having been the wife of one man." In other words, widows who are 80 years old and have got a good testimony, you take them in. What they're saying there, that term is be taken in. They were going to literally take care of them, pay their bills, make sure they had food for the rest of their life as long as they lived. But he said, don't do it for somebody younger than 60 years old, not 80 years old, 80 years old. Back then, that was old and stuff. But the point was, younger than that, they still had a little bit of but when they got too old and shouldn't be working, somebody should be helping them, taking care of them. People with fragile body can rightly look for help from people who are able-bodied. That's not unbiblical. If someone refuses to work when a job is available, Paul uses strong language to describe them worse than an infidel. His need is not legitimate. He should be scorned, Paul says. He is simply seeking to benefit at the expense of others. But there's a precaution when you think of 1 Timothy 5:8. Children of parents who choose not to work did not make that choice. So sometimes we bring these kids in on the vans and they didn't choose to be in that lifestyle. I know I was in that lifestyle as a young person. It's all I knew. I thank God some people got a hold of me and taught me to work and taught me to live differently and taught me to have a higher standard for myself than that. But the reality was sometimes there are children your neighbor kid might run over and just look at your food on the grill like they're a puppy that hasn't eaten for a week. You can't blame them for what mom and dad have decided if they're partying or laying around drugged up and stuff. And so that's why sometimes you have to go out and you have to meet these kids where they live and help them and show them that there's a better way. And so the first question you ask when you're talking about benevolence is, are they willing to work? And if they're unemployed, if they have a physical impairment, if they're going through a tough time, help them out. But people that aren't willing to work, that have just spent their life finding out who's going to take care of them next, be careful investing in that. Number 2, have they named the need? Have they named the need? This is kind of unusual, but Matthew 5:42, Jesus is talking about what Christians should be like. It's called the Sermon on the Mount, and this is how Christianity should look. And he lists several things, verse by verse, and he says in verse 42 of Matthew chapter 5, give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not away. So has that person asked for help? In our search for wisdom and benevolence, we must recognize a timing in this verse. Jesus speaks of the moment when someone asks for help. So why would it be important not to, I guess, be helping prematurely? Well-intentioned people can sometimes be too quick to try to fix unexpressed needs that are none of their business. Well, the clothes she wears are just so out of date and so frumpy, I just think she must need money. Here's some money for clothes. She likes her clothes. Be careful if somebody hasn't asked, if it's not obvious. The people who seem to be in need may have means that you don't know about. They just are happy the way they're living. I mean, misers have died in poverty and they have millions of dollars. So be careful if they have not expressed the need. They may be offended or feel like they are being treated with pity if you try to help them when they're not ready. The timing is important. God may have a plan and a provision that's not yet been revealed, and you're going to get in the way of God doing something miraculous. It is possible to cause a person to depend too much on others if you help too often without them having time to pray and seek and find out how to get an answer. However, if a person asks for help, how should we respond? We should be generous in our heart when those people's needs and deserve their help is legitimate, like we talked about. They're willing to work, but there's a situation in their life and they're behind, and now's the time to help them. Should we always wait until people ask before we step in to help? Some might feel guilty or embarrassed to ask for help. They truly have a need, but they don't want to say anything. Well, the third question will help us with that one. The last question we can ask as we're thinking about helping people, are they willing to work? Have they named the need? And lastly, have you observed an obvious need? Have you observed an obvious need? And this is a lengthy portion of Scripture, but Jesus is talking in Matthew 25, 34 through 40. He says this, then shall the king say unto them on his right hand. So verse 33 says there's people on his left hand, people on his right hand. People on his right hand are his sheep. Their salvation is already determined. It's not determined by what they did. What they did was because they were saved. And so they're on his right hand. And so it says, and them that are on his right hand, come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. He says, verse 35, for I was hungered, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Verse 37 says, then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee an hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? Verse 38, when saw we a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick, or in prison and came unto thee? Verse 40, and the king shall answer and say unto them, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the one of these, the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. You know, some needs are so obvious that you don't really have to think about it and pray about it. If you already know the person's willing to work, and you already know the person has not named the need and maybe too proud to name the need, it's obvious. If a person's house burns down, it's obvious they need help. They should not have to ask. If a person's had major surgery and needs some encouragement and need a little bit of help, they ought not to have to ask. We ought to be wise enough to see that these things are on. Is the need so obvious that the only right response could possibly be is to help them? What kind of needs does the passage say they ministered? Well, they fed hungry. They gave drink to thirsty. They housed strangers. They clothed the naked. They visited the sick. They comforted those in prison. These are basic survival needs. The well-being of the only right response to those are to help. And in Matthew 25, some say that, oh, does that mean what we do and how we help people determines our salvation? The king has set these sheep on his right hand before examining their works in verse 33. So their salvation's already been determined. This passage is not teaching that their righteousness is demonstrated by their works, or that they are teaching that their righteousness is demonstrated by their works, not determined by their works. When a person belongs to God, they're going to have a heart to be benevolent. And so they didn't become a child of God by being benevolent. They were benevolent because they were a child of God. And so they're doing these acts and these blessings to these people. How can we know that these commended people in our story did their deeds of kindness, did not do them just to earn rewards? Well, the passage depicts them as surprised at the commendation. They were like, Lord, when did we do it? They couldn't even remember when they did it. And God said, I noticed. I noticed when you sent a card. I noticed when you took some soup. I noticed when you went to the hospital. I noticed when you connected with that person in jail who made a stupid decision, but you stuck with them until they got out and had a second chance at life. God notices those things. Such needs occur when, as I said, fire destroys a home, natural disasters strike, families fall into poverty, people lose property because of victims of crime, disease or death takes a breadwinner from a family. Citizens are displaced because our churches, we're constantly sending money somewhere because somebody's going through some kind of a disaster. And that's the biblical plan, and that's the biblical way. But if you're not careful, people who don't biblically qualify will make you feel guilty about giving money, or we'll go around feeling guilty, or we'll get so tired of the excess we won't do anything. And we have biblical questions we can ask. This morning, first text I got this morning was from evangelist Mike Pelletier, and he told me about a fellow, Amos Moses. He's a graduate of Ambassador Baptist College 20 years ago, and he's in India. He's in Bangalore, India. There's a church over 300 as a school and an orphanage, and the Buddhists in that community and area have really risen up to attack the Christians, and so the government in that area seized all their assets, took their houses away from the people that were living in them, took their bank accounts away from them, and suddenly they had all these kids, the school, the teachers, the orphanage workers and stuff, and no money to pay any of them. And so this has been going on for a few months now, and so they're way behind. They had $20 in the bank, and he was calling around, and he said, listen, sometimes you guys over there at Bible West Temple, you have some discretionary funds, and I'm just trying to raise some money for Moses. He's been over there over 20 years in this ministry working, and they're in a desperate situation under persecution. Is there anything you can do? And, honestly, at first I had that reaction of, well, it's just a need. I don't know. And all that stuff. And then I came to work and I was studying on this message. And I texted him. I said, well, how would we make that check out? And who would we send that to? And the money is there. And I don't, and there's some discretion, but I don't want to spend it all at once and then not have it when somebody. But if that's not an emergency need, I don't know what is. And so he sent, I don't know, he even... Zella or something, Zelly or something. He sent $1,000 immediately to them in Zelly. I don't have a Zelly. But, and then we sent money back to him to put in his account. And I just put a smiley face and said, checks in the mail. And he said, it better be or my wife's going to kill me, because he sent 1,000 personal savings over to help them out. But he didn't know that. And then he called and talked to Moses, said there's some money coming over to help out, just in the interim, in the emergency. And he said, oh, we only had $20 left in the bank to feed and take care of these people. Now, listen, we can't get Amos Moses and all those people out of everything, but we can help there and get them through that. Because especially the household of faith, man, they got, we're going to go over, there's a orphanage we're going to visit. Somebody in our church already put some money in. I'm going to take that to the orphanage when we're over there. And we're going to help out in different places. But we can't do everything for everybody. We can do something for somebody. But it's okay to have a biblical point of view on who you help, when you help. Because if you're not, you're going to emotionally do it out of guilt, or you're going to emotionally do it just to get rid of people. And we ought to pray. We ought to pray about it. We ought to know why we're doing it. And we ought to balance Galatians 6:10 there with Matthew about the wolves and stuff. And we ought not to get to the place where we don't help anybody. And we ought not get to the place where we help everybody. We ought to get some balance in doing it as a church and certainly as individual Christians. And so, are they willing to work? 1 Timothy 5:8. Have they named a need? Matthew 5:42. Be patient, wait. Again, many times people come to me and say, did you hear about so-and-so? They had to replace their furnace. And I'll pray on it, and I'll say, talk to the men, and we'll send a check. Never talk to them, never say anything. They'll usually send a thank you note. So we listen, we hear. But there's a lot of people, the people who are always asking, and the people who won't ask never ask. And you've got to try to find out the balance between those two. And then lastly, have you observed an obvious need? If somebody's going through something's happened desperately, and you're aware of it, that's an opportunity to try to take advantage of it. But sometimes we have to be humble enough to say, hey, need a little help. And and the Lord will open some doors. Sometimes we pray about it and something just supernaturally happens and we're like, wow, that was certainly the Lord opening that door. So just some things to think on. If you have your prayer list there, we're going to run through this and then just let you pray. And as you're done praying, you can dismiss. But as you know, Clint Nottingham's at Ruby had major surgery. He speared himself with it's the thing that you pick up hay with. It's a hay spearer. So now it's a Clint spearer. But anyway, it was amazing how he got off of it and how he got 911 called. It's a miracle he's alive, but he's got a long road ahead of him. So pray for him. Wilma Bennett is UHC. Roberta Swiger at UHC as well. Ruth Martin, again, hadn't been up for a year and a half. Getting back on her, using her hips, going to be a major effort for her. Wes Nugent, 46 years old, had a bike accident. I don't know if that's a motorcycle or a biking accident, but he's paralyzed from the neck down. That is a major change in your life overnight. Dean Peterman's shoulder still recovering. That's quite a long recovery. And Bob Settler's here, but just pray they figure out what's going on with his back and the pain that he's dealing with. And then Diane Snyder, Kurt's wife, had surgery and now has to have follow-up radiation pills, so pray for that. And under cancer, Tori's dad, Jamie Kosick, they did the biopsy, got it back, and he does have cancer, so they'll be treating him for cancer. And then he just today found out that didn't lose his job, but they reorganized it, and now he doesn't have a job. So you battling cancer and you find out you don't have a job, that's a lot to be hit with all at once. So pray for him and pray for that. Rick Knight is not on hospice. They kind of upgrade him, but he is staying with family. He's not able to stay by himself anymore. And Lisa Paralak, just continue to pray for her as she's battling with cancer. And Lisa Wolf did not get a good report. They found 3 more spots, so they're going to have to up her treatment somehow in some manner, so pray for that. And then bereaved Roger Baga's family, that's Phyllis Piggott's brother. He was crossing the street, was hit by a truck and Monday evening, or Monday, and by evening, and then they took him off life support, and last night he passed away, and was a believer, but still tough on the family. He's got 5 sons and his wife and extended family, so pray for them. Debbie Chapman family, and then Ryan Lance family is that teacher/coach that was tragically killed yesterday. And Baylor May Liller family's a little baby prayed for. They're going to be doing a service, and some of our folks have opportunity maybe to be a testimony witness, so keep praying for that. David made it clear. He said, he was fasting and wouldn't eat, and when the baby died, he suddenly got up, took a bath, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. He said, I can't bring the baby back, but I'm going to go see the baby. And that's a good gospel opportunity to tell people, hey, are you ready to go see your baby? And so just pray that those opportunities for the gospel will go forward. Any updates on the list or others here? Yes?